Howdy folks, Rob MaximumRD back again, and I just recently watched this video by our friend Rich from ReviewTechUSA. He was basically detailing and reminiscing about his personal history with computers throughout his life, and made a nice 20-minute video on that. Very interesting. I'll link in the description to that, and don't forget to check out ReviewTechUSA. He's basically does classic and modern game tech reviews and news and pretty much everything related to gaming. So check out his channel, say hi, subscribe, and tell him MaximumRD sent you, and let me prop you up here as I prepare. Hopefully this works out. Don't fall. Oh, it's always fun trying to properly center myself. Here, I bet that's too high. That's probably too low. Hopefully that's about right. I don't know. Let's see. That's probably better. Okay. So, anyways, yeah, so I just thought I'd do this kind of off the cuff, wing it, which is, you know, always a challenge with my memory capabilities, but thinking back on it, I would say that my history with computers started, oh my god, so long ago now. I'm so old, but as long as I can remember, I've always been fascinated by computers, even, you know, starting out with the old primitive ones, much like Rich and a lot of the older people here on YouTube. I pretty much saw the whole evolution of home computers, from the point where it was considered, you know, unlikely and not very practical, to it, of course, becoming pretty much a requirement in the majority of homes today. And I think my earliest memories, I would say, not surprisingly, as I'm sure a lot of people can relate to, were in school. Because back then, of course, the thought of myself owning a computer was way beyond my reach financially. And same for my family. So pretty much I would try to obtain any time, any use, any exposure to computers that I could by any means, whether that meant at stores or school or a friend's house or anything like that. So on that note, I would say I recalled in school there was something called the Commodore PET line of computers. This is one of my earliest memories. And basically these machines were like, if you ever watch some of those 70s sci-fi flicks where they're trying to look all futuristic and have like these computer headquarters, or possibly even on like a 70s starship, there are always these consoles, these big box consoles with the monitor, and it's like beige, very bulky and boxy. That's pretty much what the Commodore PET line looked like. It had the amber monochrome display, green. You also had them in green, and basically it was just an interface, just a command line driven DOS type of looking interface to it. And they also ran off of cassette tapes. You could load programs very frustratingly slowly off of cassette tapes. And yeah, the games, of course, being in school, were edutainment titles, as they say. But I didn't care. As long as I was interacting with the computer, I would, you know, I pretty much enjoyed anything I could on it. So yeah, basically there were no graphics. It was like ASCII type characters, squares, circles, stickmen, things like that, which, you know, made you have to utilize a lot of your imagination. And that we did, most certainly. I think an early Hangman type of game was one of the first ones I played. If you look up a game called, I think, was it Oilswell, where basically you start at the top of the screen and you have like a snake that goes down these tubes and you hit areas, and I think oil springs out of the ground or something, and there was an early version of that on the computer. A lot of word and number games, of course, and just your basic games where you were prompted to enter answers for the times table and things like that. But I think already, even at that stage, I was already under the hypnotic glare of the computer monitor, and just, I guess my imagination just ran away with me on what was possible, or what could one day be possible. And I knew it would be big somehow. I just couldn't grasp at that point how that might be. And of course, you know, time went on, and we started to see introduction to new machines. I remember first seeing a Commodore VIC-20, which, if I recall correctly, that was pretty much their original entry into the home market. The possibility of actually having a machine in your home to do things like, oh, you know, of course, the family taxes, the financial planning, cataloging recipes and things like that. You know, these are, of course, all the uses that we told our folks would be, you know, very useful on a home computer. It wasn't because we just wanted to play games, of course, you know, nothing like that. So yeah, the Commodore 64, I remember going to a friend's house, my friend of mine named Harry, whose older brother, he had a Texas Instruments TI-4A, TI-99 4A computer. But it was one of those situations where, you know, he really wasn't supposed to go into his brother's room and touch his things and stuff like that. And of course, if I had it my way, I would have turned the computer on and played it and everything like that. But that was not to be. So after seeing it there, I remember going downtown, seeing it on display in department stores and computer shops, and checking out that system. Also, being in Canada, Radio Shack is a big store here. I think they changed their name a while back to The Source. I don't know for you guys in the US if it's still Radio Shack or The Source, or if it's even anything like that. But they were big. They had their own line of electronics and computers. Tandy. Was it Tandy Vision? Anyway, Tandy home computers. You had like the Coco. Let's see what else. Coco, was it Coco 2? Can't remember. I didn't really get into that line of computers. Something just seemed odd to me back then about a computer line by Radio Shack or Tandy Vision, or Tandy as they were known. So I wasn't really into those ones. And then, of course, the big bomb hit at the time, the Commodore 64. Wow, mind blown. Did eventually get a hold of one of those, and for me personally, as far as a computer in the home, yes, I was one of the early Commodore 64 users. Amazing machine. Just type Commodore 64 or C64 and you'll see everything you want to know. I'd be very surprised if you already didn't know about it. But yeah, that was one that had great gaming and awesome, for the time, graphic capabilities. The SID sound chip, just forget about it. You could actually, you know, compose music and playback, digitize instruments, so on and so forth. That was really a big evolution in sound as far as computers were concerned. Now, as far as the you know, beige box, as they say, the old classic DOS computers, what later evolved to be your, you know, your 286, 386, 486, Pentium, and so forth. I was never really into those. I don't know what it was. They really didn't appeal to me. Of course, in the business world, they were hitting big time. Same thing with the Apple machines. I didn't really gravitate toward those. I went directly from the Commodore 64 to the Amiga 500, and with the multitasking and the thousands of colors and stereo sound, I didn't feel compelled to look at monochrome screens with bleeps and bloops for sound or anything like that. And by the time, you know, PCs, IBM compatibles had actually reached the capability of having any type of stereo sound or color graphics, I still, in those early stages, just found the Amiga graphics and sound capabilities to be far superior. So I stuck with that for a long, long time. I will say I actually pretty much bypassed the entire DOS era of gaming. Was that a good thing? I don't know. I mean, I know about it now. I emulate many DOS games. I've played many DOS games. To this day, you know, as far as cross-platform titles that were released on both Amiga and on DOS computers, you know, I still see the graphics and sound as being better. Unless you had, you know, a really high-end so-called multimedia PC with your, you know, sound cards and graphics cards, so on and so forth. But literally that cost thousands of dollars in comparison to the out-of-the-box, do-all, ready-to-go Amiga computer in comparison. And even though the Commodore Amiga computers were a lot more rare in Canada, even so compared to how rare they were in the U.S. They were not as big here as they were, you know, in the UK. But I still managed to obtain my machines and, you know, find those few outlets and retail suppliers that could provide you with the hardware. So really, I stuck with the Amiga platform with everything from gaming to video titling, basic video titling, mind you, graphics, art, animation. I was totally immersed in the Amiga world as far as that is concerned, and to this day, now, you know, many years later, and I'm a collector. I have all the, basically, well, oddly enough, I have no Amiga hardware, but that's a whole different sore spot I don't even want to get into. But I have, you know, pretty much every other early home computer, from your Texas Instruments to your Coco color computers, Coco 3 I think it is. I have my Coco 2. I don't know, I have one of those machines. I've barely even looked at it. Several of the Atari ST line, several of the Atari 8-bit line. Having experienced them now and looking back on it, I wouldn't have changed a thing. The Commodore and Amiga route was the way I went back then, and even having the time back, I would not have gone down the Atari line. I don't feel I missed anything, and I enjoyed the Amiga much more. Even comparing them now, I can understand why there was much appeal for the Atari machines. Obviously, great prices and a lot of availability. But who knows, that could have been part of the reason, because the Amiga was so hard to get a hold of and more of an obscure machine. It was also that machine that when someone came over and I was running a demo on, or an animation or something on it, their eyes would open wide and their jaws would drop and they're like, what kind of PC is that? And I was like, let me tell you about Amiga. So yeah, getting back to it, even though today, obviously I'm a collector with dozens of computers, and, multiple systems, if there was ever a time, like, I consider myself unbiased, I consider myself not a fanboy at all. I collect them all. They're all a part of history. They're all a part of the evolution of computing. But at that time, back when I originally owned Amiga hardware and was into the Amiga, that was the one time in my life where I admit I could have called myself a fanboy. Yeah, I could have literally talked for hours about the Amiga computers, and still could. So I'm going to cut myself off on that path right now, much to your relief, I'm sure. So yeah, I pretty much skipped the whole DOS era. It was amazing. Believe me, I've researched and I've looked into it. I've a friend of mine, again, same friend whose brother had the Texas Instrument computer, Harry. He was always into your PCs, your DOS machines, your Windows boxes, the Microsoft type of computer. He was always into that. So early on, he was, into the flight sims. He was very much into the flight sims and strategic type games, real-time simulations, things like that. See, I was never into that stuff. I was into the platform games, the, Mario type of games, if you will. I wasn't even into RPGs, never was. I can't stand turn-based fighting. Closest thing to an RPG that I've ever enjoyed were, of course, the Zelda games, which I guess would be more adventure or action RPG, whatever category you want to put it in, that doesn't have, that type of turn-based battling system. Those are the games I preferred. So yeah, I guess he was always more of a planner, a thinker, someone who liked to work with tactics and things like that. So, on that note, it's probably not too surprising that he was more into the PC and those type of games that were on that platform. But at the same time, he just loved PC hardware. I go to his house and he'd be trying to configure, as Rich alluded to, you had IRQ conflicts and you had to set the specific, see, again, I wasn't into this stuff, so I couldn't even describe it to you properly, but I know your video card, your sound card, IRQ conflicts, setting up the right drivers for a specific game, making sure you had the requirements, the right amount of memory, yada yada, everything like that. I would watch him, and when he would finally get all this stuff running, it was awesome. And he had his Microsoft flight stick and he was just in heaven. I would go home, take a 3 1/4 inch floppy, shove it into the side of my Amiga, boot up, boom, I'm playing the game. So I didn't see the appeal of all that effort that went into setting up your PCs and such. So yeah, it's funny, really. At some point, through ups and downs and financial troubles and getting rid of hardware, I had to come back to computing at some point. And I realized this was after Commodore's demise, and the real Commodore, and after they had left the market, there were no new machines to be produced. I had to, get back into computing. And I had considered, this was probably around the time of the original iBooks and iMacs, the multicolored candy lollipop colored computers, which honestly, to me, those were the ones that were interesting. Those were the Apple machines that, when I think of that slogan, think different, that those are the machines that applied to it. They stood out. They were different. And, they were even on a different architecture, a different CPU, all that, powered PC. And I really considered it. But again, same problem. I found, looking, you had your dedicated Mac stores, of course. And I went into a few. I tested the machines. I did like them. I liked, the interface and all that. But there was something that I wasn't, that wasn't winning me over. And I think it was part of that feeling. It was the same feeling I had with the Amiga computers. And although I thought they were superior at the time, and that they were better machines, I had grown tired of not being able to get support. I grew tired. I know some people wear it as a badge of honor, being the one that's different and can, has the machine that not everyone else has and stuff like that. And part of me did love that about the Amiga, because it was, it was almost like an exclusive club with this superior machine. But getting back into the whole computer platform, I didn't want to go through that whole feeling again of isolation. And all I knew at the time was, I lived in Toronto, Canada, still in Canada now. I'm in BC, a small city in BC. But, you go downtown, walk 3 blocks, walk 4 blocks, you might have found one Mac store, one Apple supported store. The other 20 you passed were PC. That's just the way it was. So I knew if something went wrong, or I needed support, or I needed assistance, if I went to talk to somebody else or talk to a friend or a relative or somebody like that, I knew it would be, they could relate to a PC. So this time getting back into computers, I wanted to, belong and have some support. So I went reluctantly with the PC, the Windows machines, the window boxes. And at that time, I'm pretty sure my first home computer, PC computer, Windows machine, had Windows 98 on it. And it wasn't long after that I think it was Windows 98 second edition had hit. And by that, it was, by that time it was worked out pretty well. Most of the bugs were worked out. Most of the problems and issues were worked out. It had become a lot more truly plug and play than it had been back, with the DOS boxes. So yeah, that was my first Microsoft operating system. Since then, it's been a brief, very brief encounter with Windows Millennium, Windows ME. And then I had bought a laptop that came with Vista that everyone was raging on, but I fiddled around with it. I didn't have any trouble. Kept it on there for quite some time. And then Windows 7 debuted, and Windows 7 64-bit is on my desktop. Windows 7 32-bit is on my laptop. And that's the way it will stay. As far as Windows 8, I am currently playing around with it in a virtual environment using virtual not VMware, but not virtual PC. What is it? Virtual something. Anyways, you know what I'm talking about. I'm running Windows 8 in a virtual environment. It's not actually loaded natively on my machine, so I can play around with it. I can try things with it, and you know, at the end of the day, I take a snapshot of it, and it's gone. It's not my default operating system, and you know, really, honestly. Again, I don't see the big hubbub. I'm not having any problem with it, and considering the specs of my desktop, which, you know, it's no hardcore gaming rig by any means. It's, you know, 4 gigs of RAM, a core, Intel Core dual E6750 processor, and 250 GTS GeForce video card. I did stick an SSD in there, which, you know, it's amazing. But for that hardware spec, considering I'm running Windows 8 in a virtual environment, it runs great. It runs really, really well. I'm quite impressed with it. So no, I'm not about to run out and buy it or pay for a license for it or install it natively on the hardware or anything like that. Should the next, well, I'd probably build my desktops, but should my next laptop or whatever device I may get come preloaded with Windows 8, I'm not going to remove it. It'll stay on there because I tend to learn an operating system, bend it to my will, optimize it, enhance it, configure it, adjust it to the way I like to work, and that's it. I just move on from there. So yeah, I've blabbered on for a long, long time. Again, just off the top of my head, as you can probably could probably tell, but what the hell. Thanks, Rich from ReviewTechUSA. As always, amazing channel and videos. Check them out. That's my history with computers, pretty much, at least the way I remember it. So I hope you got some enjoyment out of it. Rob, MaximumRD out. Thanks for watching, and catch you later.